Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're all very welcome to the 13th webinar in the Irish Bioenergy Association webinar series. My name is Sean Finan. I'm the CEO of the Irish Bioenergy Association. And this morning's topic is the value of Ireland's private forestry, timber, energy, and the bioeconomy. Just a small introduction to the Irish Bioenergy Association. And as I know, we have some new attendees this morning which haven't attended our webinars previously. So we were established in 1999. We are the representative body for the Irish bioenergy industry in the island of Ireland. We cover the main sectors of biomass, biogas, biofuels, biochar, wood fuels, and energy crop sectors. Our main focus is policy lobbying, advocacy, and knowledge transfer. However, we get involved in a number of research projects and a variety of other activities. And we have a broad and diverse membership, and we're always looking for new members. So if you would like to join the organisation, feel free to check out our website, www.erbia.org, and all the information is available there. Or feel free to get in touch with myself, Teresa O'Brien, or indeed any of our presenters this morning. Our agenda this morning is led by Maurice Ryan, who is a Vice President of Erbia and Greenbelt's Business Development Director. We will then follow Maurice's presentation with a panel discussion where we'll be joined by Hugo McCormick, Greenbelt Operations Director, and Noel Gavigan who is our Erbia Technical Executive. If you would like to post questions, you can do so through the Q&A tab, which is available at the bottom of the screen, and we will endeavour to answer as many questions as possible. We will conclude at 10:30, so 1 hour maximum. Just a quick reminder that we've been rolling out these webinars for the last 6 months now, and the series has been very successful. It has taken place fortnightly on Wednesdays from 9:30 to 10:30. Recordings of all the webinars which we have rolled out to date are available on our website, as well as the presentations from this webinar. It will be available afterwards on our website, and also previous webinars are all available on erbia.org. We are planning for the next number of webinars and progressing with our calendar for 2021. And if you would like to present, please contact us by email or by phone, and we will be happy to discuss what type of presentation you could give. The first webinar of 2021 will take place on the 13th of January from 9:30 to 10:30. We have to yet confirm the speaker and the topic, but we will be doing so early in the new year. Just by way of introduction, before I hand over to Maurice, the private forestry resource makes up approximately 50% of the Irish forestry estate. This is a very valuable resource for timber, energy, and the bioeconomy. It's a very valuable carbon sink. It creates rural jobs, and it provides business opportunities in the processing sector for structural timber, and indeed in the energy sector for wood fuels. The biggest challenge that the private forestry estate will face over the next decade will be how to mobilize that resource. And that is a challenge, and something which Maurice will discuss this morning. The most valuable use of final clear fell material is a construction and structural timber. And there are issues at the moment regarding the DFM licensing system which need to be addressed. But I would like to provide one piece of clarification before we continue with this morning's webinar. In our publication or promotion of the webinar, we referenced 0 licenses in a paragraph which we used to describe this webinar. This in fact is incorrect. There's been no week where there's been 0 licenses issued, and we are happy to clarify on that administrative error which happened in the paragraph used to promote the webinar. Bioenergy does provide an outlet for lower value first and second thinning materials and brash, and this material is processed by Erbia Wood Fuel Quality Assurance members, and they provide valuable, certified and quality wood fuels to the market. And full details of the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme is available through wfqa.org. I would like to acknowledge the ongoing support of the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine to promote the WFQA. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for this morning. Maurice Ryan, as I said, is a Vice President of Erbia, but also Director of Greenbelt, and has worked at Greenbelt developing business opportunities for both farmers and landowners who wish to plant new forestry. Greenbelt has been involved in 30 million of investment into Irish land and forestry since 2013. Maurice has nurtured strong relationships with many people within the industry, and particularly in the area of investment. Allied to this, he is developing areas by adding value to forestry portfolios beyond the traditional, pioneering growth and diversification through addressing climate issues and carbon emissions. As part of his current role, he's promoting FAC investment, and this initiative creates clusters of semi-mature forestry in nationally strategic locations to service in markets, including sawmills and biomass facilities. So we're looking forward to hearing Maurice's presentation. So I thank you, Maurice, for joining us this morning. I thank you for your ongoing support to Erbia, and indeed your ongoing work as a Vice President of the organisation. So I'll stop sharing my screen, Maurice, and I'll turn over to you and allow you to share your screen. Over to you, Maurice.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you to yourself and Teresa and Noel and all at Erbia for hosting these webinars, firstly, but also allowing us the opportunity to speak at this.
We might turn on your camera, Maurice, if you can.
Now.
I think your camera is off. Yes.
There we go. We're all good.
And
as I say, thanks very much for allowing us the opportunity to speak today. It's as part of Erbia, which is we found a valuable organisation to be part of. We're at the grassroots side of things in terms of the supply and looking at how biomass can get to the end users, whether it be Wood Fuel Quality Association or the biomass users, which there's sort of a number of suppliers of boilers in Erbia. So it's nice to have that full circle there, and we're delighted to be part of it. My name is Maurice Ryan. I work with Greenbelt. We're a private forestry management company. We were set up in 1982, and since then we've established more than 400,000 acres of private forestry across the country for more than 10,000 clients. We manage that estate on behalf of those clients with our network of professional foresters who are located in strategic locations all across the country. We advise on all elements and offer a full suite of forestry management services to our clients, both existing and future clients. Everything from establishment management, harvesting, and natural environment management. Sustainably managing forestry has always been a cornerstone of what we have provided to the industry and to the sector, but it's becoming more and more prevalent now as the value of timber in the fight against climate change is becoming more and more widely thought of and recognised as being highly critical. Just to run through Irish forestry very briefly, there is currently 11% forestry cover in the country as it stands, or thereabouts. There had been a target to reach 17% by 2020, which has been obviously very badly missed. The impact this has on us as a country from an emission perspective are the hefty fines that are due to be paid on an annual basis going forward, as we fall very short of meeting our commitments. Forestry, as I mentioned, has been recognised as one of a number of solutions to our carbon emission profile, and obviously we, slightly biased, but would think that it is an extremely important element to that. The private, or the entire state across the country, consists of about 770,000 hectares, and that is almost shared equally between privately owned forests and the state managed forests under the guardianship of Quilcha. Quilcha obviously have an interest within the private estate too, rightly or wrongly, but they are there nonetheless. But it's an interesting to see the share of the estate becoming more even now, and because it highlights the value that the private estate is going to have for the next foreseeable future, 10, 15, 20, 30 years and beyond, in terms of timber supply to all sectors within the industry. You'll see from this slide the increase in forestry cover since 1922, since foundation of the state, and more specifically within the private estate from the late 80s and particularly mid 90s. A huge volume of private forestry was established, which took over. That would come in line with the advent of grants initially, and then grants and premiums, particularly in the sort of from 1992 onwards. So you'll see the availability there and the increase in timber or land under forestry. The state forestry initiative has dwindled slightly. Their impact from their days of being the main party establishing forestry in the private estate obviously has taken up that mantle, which is a very positive element. But worryingly so, from year 2000, you can see there's been a diminishing number of hectares on an annual basis planted. This goes contra to what most of the parties have said recently, in terms of the government parties have said with their targets of planting 8,000 hectares per annum, which has been mooted for the last 7 or 8 years, but it's not been achieved since 8,000 hectares in 2010 was the last time, but that was a remarkable recovery. This is obviously a very, very worrying trend, and puts the industry under significant pressure. But longer term vision on this puts the supply element for timber for all elements within the industry, sawmills through to biomass supply to panelboard mills, under increasing pressure, which will lead to imports, which obviously is not what we should be doing or need to be doing. Again, we look at the forecast of harvest volumes from quilch in the private estates is forecast to be doubled from the 2015 numbers of 3.1 million cubic meters of timber to 6.4 million cubic meters of timber. But one thing I would stress here is that this is actually just forecast timber. We would project that there's going to be significant issues in actually being able to mobilize and deliver this timber from the private estate, certainly in the current side of things, but if more and more action isn't done to add value and to develop more of the private estate. For all parties involved in timber and forestry supply, the one critical element of it is security of supply. Whether you be a sawmill, whether you're looking to be, or whether you're Bord na Móna, or you're setting up a CHP facility as a private individual or a private entity, security of supply is critical to a future business plan, and being able to guarantee that supply is obviously extremely important. And from an Indigenous perspective, it's really it's ideal that it is coming from local supplies. By local, I mean Irish supplies. I have a short video here, just highlighting the. Oh, sorry, back there. And that should play. That's just a brief video, obviously, just going through the format of the grants and premium side of things and establishing a forest. Once a forest is established and up and running, when it comes to harvesting, whether that's traditional clearfell harvesting or more recently you're seeing more continuous cover forestry, CCF, the larger scale timber is going to go to one of probably 9 major sawmills around the country. The balance of the material will go to other sawmills, panel board mills, or indeed for biomass, as we've mentioned numerous times. When you're looking at forestry and forest owners, obviously they need to consider some of these elements from their estate, from the portfolio of forestry, whether it be 4 hectares or 400 hectares. That good access obviously increases the ability to extract timber from that forest. A good consistent crop, I mean a good consistent value from that crop. Proximity to market obviously reduces your haulage costs, which is again money into your own back pocket, and the potential to cluster. And by that I mean that you're not an outlier. The forest can be harvested in sequence with many other forests, which obviously improves the economics the economy of scale of actually harvesting in a region. Mobilising Irish timber is what we're here, one of the elements we're here to discuss, and it's a very, very critical element to getting timber to market. It's a critical element for the future of the industry in general. And one of the main element to try and get this across the line is introducing felling licenses. Obviously, felling licenses are important and necessary for all harvesting operations. The detail involved in a felling license now has become very, very high level, itemising all aspects and all elements within this. The majority of applications, whether it be for afforestation or harvesting, need to be accompanied by a natura impact statement, which will assess the potential impact forestry may have on its environs within a 15-kilometre radius. So when we look at producing a map, whether this is a biomap for afforestation, as you see here, or for a harvesting map, you consider all elements of it. Where your broadleaves are going to be planted, where your harvesting roads are going to be, where your water courses will be, how you mitigate against any potential risk that will be that could be considered for that forest or in relations relative to that forest. So a very quite an onerous task, but obviously a very, very important element to this. Once your forest has reached its stage, you harvest that timber. The timber goes to the relevant market, whether it be the panel board mills of biomass or further afield. But obviously building a forest road to develop an infrastructure into the forest is critically important too. Here you see an example of a forest road that allowed access directly into the heart of the forest, and it made available the timber to a local market from here. Once harvested, it's delivered on timber trucks away to this market was within 80 kilometres again from this forest, which is a sort of an optimal range if you can manage it. Not always available, but certainly a good range to try and operate within. And we put together numbers for timber prices from the private estate since 2005, and you can see there's a steady increase in the timber value. Obviously there's some peaks and some troughs, the trough of 2009 being a remarkable one, but a good recovery there in 2010 probably would have been related to the Olympics in the UK. Again, you'll see some dips, say there in 2016, but they recovered strongly again in other years. Numbers aren't included yet for 2020, but we'll see that as another spike, I would imagine, in that curve as timber prices have been strong due to the lack of licenses being issued, and so the lack of availability of timber to the market. We'll see what 2021 timber prices look like, obviously, as that year develops. So there are issues, obviously, within the industry at the moment, some very, very critical issues that are affecting the viability of many operators within this, whether it be contractors or management companies or individual forest owners, etc. The majority of these would be around the licensing side of things. There is talk that there's light at the end of the tunnel, or light in the forest, as you might see from here. but there's a certain level of skepticism, unfortunately, within the industry regarding the licensing issues. The department have committed to employing ecologists to deal with the backlog of applications and further inspectors, which we have seen that employment take place to some degree. Unfortunately, it hasn't reflected in the issuance of licenses to the degree that we would have anticipated or expected, but we are assured on a regular basis that will change and will continue to improve. We must take them at their word for this and hope that it isn't just a purely Quilcha focused exercise, that it is the private estate that is going to get the same level of attention as that. In a very, very simple screen, there was talk of only 2,000 licenses held up in the system recently, but we've seen that 2,000 licenses only referred to certain Quilcha licenses and certain felling licenses. There's actually closer to 5,000 licenses held up in the system, which obviously is quite a concern. One of the main stumbling blocks that had been mooted as an issue within the industry was the Forest Appeals Committee. A legislation was passed recently, the Forest Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 2020, which introduced fees for forest applications and appeals, and it also allowed the FAC to determine appeals without an oral hearing and to sit in divisions of itself, which was designed obviously to accelerate the FAC process. Again, we're hoping that this will accelerate more and more licenses through the appropriate assessment process. Again, the appropriate assessment is a very important element to it, to make sure that things are done in the right way, in a sustainable manner, and something that can support and encourage more forestry in all locations and localities, which adds so much value to local communities in terms of local employment, directly and indirectly across the lifetime of forests. In a recent dashboard from the department that they issued, we can see some of the numbers being spoken about here. So we looked at felling licenses across the private estate and the Quilcha estate, and you see in November there was 177 licenses issued to Quilcha and 72 issued to the private estate. Slightly closer to parity in November, 102 versus 81. But again, obviously we would like to see an increase in those numbers where possible. There's a lot of people hopefully will still be able to open the doors on the 1st of January based on those numbers. Again, we mentioned the future side of things and the availability of timber. We looked at the short term there, but the longer term, which sort of takes into account the new planting side of things. In hectares in 2019, there was 4,300 hectares planted apparently. In 2020, that was down to 3,843. A contrasting number is closer to reality. I think it's 3,540. This season is likely to only reach maybe 2,500 hectares of new planting, which is obviously extremely distressing, both in the short term and obviously, as I mentioned, in the longer term for timber availability. But as I say, the department have promised to address this, so let's hope they do. We can all do with increased volume of timber, we can all do with more work around the inventory side of forestry and looking at getting and mobilising timber to market. One of the elements of the private forestry estate that is going to see a huge increase in demand and obviously then lead to, we would like to think, improved revenues for forest owners is the biomass supply. Based on the projections from COFORD and one of their publications recently, the estimated demand supply shortfall is going to be close to 3 million cubic meters of material by 2025. That's obviously, they've put in the best case scenario in terms of biomass uptake, and whether that be through Bord na Móna code for co-firing, other large facilities that may come to market, but also with the implementation of the SSRH, if and when that comes, to see installations across the country. and local biomass usage in CHP facilities. Perfect storm will see about a 3 million cubic meters shortage of supply. So we have to look at ways, creative ways of actually addressing that. Mobilising the private estate is obviously very, very important. There's a statistic that suggests that only 38% of the private estate is accessible and available. Even 38% of 365,000 hectares is still nearly 130,000 hectares of material. So there's still a huge amount of material that is available for the markets. But alternatives to that, and something that is supported by the department, is short rotation forestry and short rotation coppicing. Here you'll see an example of a 4-year-old poplar plantation. It's hard to get a perspective of exactly what that is, but it's about 6 meters in height, about 10 centimeter average diameter. Once it closes canopy, it shoots up. So there's a lot of management involved in actually getting it to an establishment phase and getting it to this point. But this is now a harvestable crop. This is a photo from a plantation we established in 2016, and we're going to be harvesting it this season, this winter when the foliage is down. And we're lucky that it has been somewhat dry, which will obviously protect the ground. But this is an alternative that should be considered by farmers. It could be seen as an energy crop, or through the department, it is supported through grants and premiums, and it's a 15-year premium, which can match a cycle if you decide to plant it with broader spacing than is seen here. So poplar is certainly a viable crop that farmers can look at. And for those who don't like Sitka spruce, this is a hardwood and is a little bit more attractive looking. Another element that private forestry is going to play a big part in is the advent of the bioeconomy within Ireland. Ireland has a massively untapped resource here in terms of intellectual property, in terms of availability of resources and capital to deploy into the bioeconomy. The bioeconomy is designed to, I suppose, reduce the dependence on fossil fuels, diminish the carbon emissions that we're producing, and to, I would see it as something that can add a lot of value to local economies, to rural economies, long-term sustainable employment in those areas through the implementation of let's pick bioplastics, for example, and bioplastics can be derived from the chemical residue from forests. Another element to consider within the forest element side of things, and certainly for new planting, is the carbon capture and ultimately the carbon trading side of things. So there's a huge amount of potential and untapped resources within the private forestry estate, and something that we should be leveraging more and more out of. It can work as a collaboration, and forestry should be seen as a very important part of the broader agricultural community, and see where that can be, where the values can be added across all of that. Pippa Haggett recently signed off and promoted as did Minister McConalogue, the Ag Climatised document, which suggests that agriculture has a big role to play in addressing our climate conditions. One of the elements that can be and should be considered for this is biochar. Biochar derived from Irish timber. Biochar is a material derived from, as I say, from Irish timber, pyrolyzed at very high temperatures, or relatively high temperatures in a oxygen deprived state, and has a huge number of applications. From our perspective, when we produce our biochar, we're looking at it from a soil amendment perspective, from new forestry planting, from a reforestation perspective, but also we see the value that it can have in a farming sector and a farming side of things. We would look at this as a nice cascading approach to looking at how biochar can be applied within it. That's just as one example of the bioeconomy, that it can be fed to animals or put into animal bedding. It's then in the mix, i.e. in the manure that they produce. It is effectively put into a composting pit and then spread out as slurry onto the soil and broken down into the soil, where it improves the soil condition. Will deliver nutrients at a much higher rate of efficacy, and we'll see an improved grass yield. Obviously, with the CAP reforms coming in, suggesting that more and more forestry should be planted, this can also encourage and help grow the trees to a much greater, much higher yield class. And the cycle can start again, and that timber can be harvested and recycled into biochar. That is pretty much everything I have to say at the moment, but I see there was some questions coming in. So I'm here for the next period of time, and Hugo will join us now shortly to join in on the questions that you might have. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for listening.
That's great, Maurice, and thanks very much for your presentation. So just as you maybe, we will go through the questions. As you said, there's a number of questions which have been fed through in the Q&A tab at the bottom. We would encourage more questions. I suppose I just go to Noel Gavigan first, Maurice, just to give you a chance to maybe have a quick look at the questions yourself and maybe think about what your answers are. If I could bring in Noel, Noel, you work with, we work with the Irish Bioenergy Association. You're also managing and administrating the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme, which I mentioned in the start of the presentation. We get some more support to promote from the Department of Agriculture. Can you just give us an outline of the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme? What's involved in that? What growth it has seen in the last year, and what's your plans for the future?
Yeah, the scheme, basically, we certify any suppliers of wood fuel here in Ireland. So we certify suppliers of firewood and wood chip predominantly, but also some on pellet and wood briquettes. So it's the membership in that, we've just over 30 members now, certified suppliers within the country, and they supply literally all over the country and supply all those various fuels I mentioned, and we certify them to the European standard. It has proven very important in terms of a number of factors. So we've all, possibly the viewers that have heard of this, is the SSRH, which is a grant scheme for commercial buildings to put in wood chip and wood pellet boilers. So it's a requirement for that you have certified fuel. So for that, it's vital that you do ensure that the fuel is correct, and that's a lot of that has to do with air emissions and ensuring the correct combustion. So the scheme has proven very popular this year in terms of new members coming on board as the SSRH is ramping up. But it's also a big part of the forestry stream and what's coming out of forestry. We take up a lot of the byproduct. And obviously within the tree itself, you have the fillet of the tree, as they call it, which is your lumber. But you have both in terms of your slab wood, which is the rounding of the timber and branching of the timber. There's a lot of that material is available for energy, and there's also a lot of material from the forest itself. So pulpwood, which is basically your trees that are crooked, are too small, are at the side of the forest where there's a lot of side branching. All of that material is pulpwood, and that's all used for energy. So it comes in there as a quite a major use of the timber out of the forestry.
Okay, and for anyone that would like to get involved in the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme, they can check out the website, www.wfqa.org, and also all our social media handles, WFQA social media handles. I think it's important to also highlight that we see the WFQA as being a very valuable resource, I suppose, for fuel suppliers, in that we also provide training, awareness, educational opportunities to bring people up to speed as to what's required in terms of producing quality firewood and wood fuels. And I think that's a very important point to make as well. You're welcome, Hugo, to our panel. So I go over to Maurice for the next questions, and one in here from Larry. What are the main stumbling blocks causing the decline in annual new planting figures? And maybe if you can take that in conjunction with another question, which is there. It's from an attendee this morning who is starting from scratch, want to get into forestry alongside other work from home. Where do we start? So maybe, I know they're two separate questions and you can address them separately, but maybe take the two together to speed things up. Maurice, thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, so Larry, thanks for your question. I'll deal with that first. So the main stumbling blocks, I kind of alluded to it during the meeting, is the hold up really of getting applications processed through the ecological assessment. Really, that would be probably the main hold up at the moment. There's a requirement for an NIS with suggested 80 to 90%, but as we're seeing it nearly on nearly every plantation. Turn off your mic.
Mute you for a second, Mark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So yeah, this is just, I don't want to sit beside me. Close that off. Close it down. Yeah, sit beside me. Sorry, the two of us in an office on the one thing is giving a bit of feedback. Oh, sorry, Larry. Yes, so it mainly would be the ecological side of things is the issue. It's an expensive enough process to get, so an application, an NIS would cost in the region of about €1,000–1,500. The availability of ecologists to carry out that work is relatively limited. The Forest Service have committed to employing quite a number of those, which is obviously designed to speed up that process. But of course, the majority of the private estate would struggle to pay for that, particularly on a first thinning basis, as it may not seem to be the most to be a good way of spending the money. That's the impression they would have. So that's probably the main element to it. In terms of getting interested and involved into forestry, depends on at what level you'd like to become involved at. If you want to work in the industry, see, there's contractor roles there in terms of planting and harvesting forests, which obviously come with their own health and safety and insurance implications. If you just want to plant some forestry, obviously we can speak to you about that as well. We can look at how we establish forests on your behalf then, you know.
So I suppose the main point there, Maurice, is to get in touch with someone the likes of yourself or another private forestry company, and they will take whoever is interested in getting a forest established. They will take you would take that individual through the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And do you offer a consultation service for people that might be considering it but not fully convinced? Or
absolutely, yeah. I mean, we obviously, during COVID, we would normally have met people, but if that's viable, we can meet in the field and talk to people. But we do a lot of consultations over the phone or through Zoom calls now as well. Obviously, you know what I mean. But if you have a specific piece of land that you're looking to plant, obviously we have to look at it. But if you're just looking to consider it, we can speak over the phone or video call.
Okay. A question from William here, and I know that Maurice, you may have an answer for it, but I know Noel will bring Noel in as well after you. Recent studies have highlighted that the clearfell management system of SICA is not, in fact, a carbon sink. How are we going to change this when most of our new forests are set up for clearfell?
Yeah, so, I suppose
well, I'll let Maurice take it first, Noel, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'll reference that, and I appreciate the question, Will, because that report, and I'm not sure if you, but I know I've seen kind of comments around that report, which focused on a small element of that report that said that managing forests at 30 years plus is not a carbon sink and releases carbon into the atmosphere. If you look at it over the life cycle of the forest, from planting, it actually is a carbon sink, and it is a very significant carbon sink. And the utilization of the material into products beyond, once it's harvested, obviously continues to store carbon in those products. Replanting obviously has an impact on it as well, and it's something that we would see from a future perspective, and seeing those a bit more proactive, looking to capture and store more carbon into the soil, that we would be looking to encourage people to utilize biochar in the replanting of forests, because obviously that will capture and store more carbon, store the carbon within the biochar, which will have come from the forest in itself, but also it'll improve the yields of the new forest coming in, and which will capture more forestry. So that's it. There's also continual cover forestry is becoming more and more prevalent across the country, where suitable. Harvesting and doing CCF forestry in every location is not viable because of the potential wind risk, obviously. But I hope that helps. Bill?
Noel, do you want to come in there just as a follow-on to Maurice's point?
Yeah, I suppose the main thing there is when we're looking at anything in terms of its value as a carbon sink, you have to be always very careful to take a look at the full life cycle analysis. And to avoid reports that are literally looking at a very narrow portion of a life cycle. At harvest, obviously, but a tree is absorbing carbon all its life, and at harvest there is going to be a certain element of carbon release. But what you're putting into lumber and other materials is going to be carbon stored for many decades and possibly centuries to come. So it's, you know, that's the value of that carbon sink, and you're planting more trees afterwards so that the sink will continue. So it's just to be very careful of reports that do come out that way, whether it's to do with forestry, electric vehicles, wind energy, whatever it is. You have to be always very careful to be looking at the full life cycle and not just small portions of it.
And that, I'm not sure which specific report Will is referring to, but I know there was one recently. But can you just explain regarding that report, what it actually said, if you can remember, Noel?
Yeah, the report basically had looked at the Irish stock of forestry, and we do have quite a large stock of Sitka. We have quite and this would, that forest sink, or that issue that they brought up, would happen with any forest type, with any tree type, if you just look at it in this context. But we have a clear fell management system here in Ireland where we grow for 35, 40 years and harvest with some thinning in between. That does leave you to a point that if you look at that single forest, that hectare of land, at a certain point at 35 years, you are going to get a release of carbon, you know, and so if you're just looking at that, and the Irish estate of forestry, because we've such a peak of planting going back to the 1990s, it means that at some point in the future, that will all come around at more or less to one age. And there is going to be a certain level of release of carbon, but that's part of the cycle. And we are new to forestry in this country in a large, if you take a look at where they are in Austria and Germany, other places across Europe, where they have forestry on the same land for hundreds of years, the cycle is very much continuous. And we are ultimately going to break down into a more continuous cycle here in Ireland, and possibly looking at things like continuous cover. But we are at the early stages of setting up a forest industry here. You know, trees by their nature obviously are a long-term investment and have a life cycle longer than ourselves, many species. So it is going to take quite a long time to smoothen out those peaks and troughs that you are going to see in every aspect of forestry.
Okay, thanks very much, Noel. And just a follow-on point, I mentioned that if someone wants to plant a forest, if there's a farmer on the webinar this morning, you also have the option of a forestry consultant and also a forestry, maybe financial producer group. So that's just a follow-on comment. Back to you, Maurice. Can you just, another question from Will here. Important for potential investment of time and land in forestry, it needs to be made clear who owns the carbon credits of forestry land that has been granted, and who owns the carbon credits for forestry that hasn't been granted. So would you be able to just elaborate on that for me, Maurice, in terms of your views on that?
Yeah, my view would be that the Forest Service will claim the carbon credits for all forestry, because you need a license one way or another to establish whether you get a grant or not. You need a license. They would also already have accounted for the carbon produced or captured, if you will, from the forests in the national accounting. So the department would suggest, or the Irish government would suggest, that the carbon credits are already accounted for and under their stewardship. That's kind of a grey area and would be met with some conflicting opinions. There's no carbon trading platform in Ireland currently. I understand there is talks of one of them in being development, and that will probably bring that argument closer to the fore. But I think if I owned a forest, I'd be inclined to try and trade carbon from that forest if I possibly could.
Okay, there's a very interesting question here from Owen, and I think it's something which we would have had discussions internally within the organisation on anyway. So is there any chance we will see an extended premium period for agroforestry to 15 years, as this would be a game changer for farmer participation in forestry? So is there any, can you just maybe outline that, your thoughts on that, and maybe if you want to bring in Hugo or yourself.
Yeah, Hugo's here. Hugo.
Yeah, probably at this moment in time, not aware of it, but the new program for forestry is being discussed, and the Forest Service are the lead in terms of putting that together. Traditionally, they would have engaged with this sector more in the past than currently, but again, they will be drawing up the program and sending it out for consultation. I'm not aware that there is talk of a 15-year premium for agroforestry, but it's something that can be brought to the fore to the Forest Service, that this will be a game changer in terms of creating more agroforestry.
Yeah, and I think the other barrier potentially to agroforestry would be that it does mean that forestry, when you put land into forestry, it's gone in perpetuity. So I know there's some organizations would argue that agroforestry maybe should be treated slightly different as a transitionary crop into a mainstream forestry crop. Or I'm not sure, but it's certainly something I'm sure that will be discussed in detail with in the revised forestry programme. I just want to highlight one clarification that has come in just from Tony. He said the Department of Agriculture has denied that Ireland's forests are a net emitter of greenhouse gases and insists they remain a substantial and growing store for carbon dioxide. In a detailed response to the report it commissioned, the department says strong reaction to the findings are misleading insofar as they look only at one subset of the estate. The paper concludes that Ireland's forestry estate, classified as managed forestry land, has changed from a sink capturing CO2 during the 2012-2017 period. The report, entitled FRL 2021 to 2025, I think it is, Ireland, a National Forestry Accounting Plan, was prepared with the objective of informing Ireland's inventory of national greenhouse gases for the next 5 years as required by the European Union. Managed forest land represent 54% of all forests in 2017 and was predicted to reach 66% by 2025. And I think that was actually a quote from Minister Hackett, I'm led to believe. So just to clarify that, we're happy to ensure that, I suppose, all the information we're sharing is factual and correct. So thanks very much, lads, for your answers to the question on the agroforestry. A question here, Morris or Hugo, thinking of purchasing a site of 28-year-old spruce, does the license transfer and what are the rough costs of replanting per acre?
Say that again, does the license?
Does the, thinking of purchasing a site of 28-year-old spruce, does the license transfer and what are the rough costs of replanting per acre? So we have to assume it may be referring to the felling license. I'm not sure. We have to make an assumption here. We don't have the information, but can you give us your thoughts, Morris, or Hugo?
Yeah, well, probably in relation to the land, once the forest is licensed with the previous owner, there should be no issue with the new owner using that license. Now, in the case where there would be a transfer process informing the Forest Service, they may request that the new owner reapply, but in essence we would be of the belief that once it's licensed that we can work off that license.
Okay, and what would the replanting cost per acre be approximately?
You're talking about 1,100 per acre to do an initial 1 year planting job, and then maintenance then would be in the region of 150 to 300 an acre, depending on the level of maintenance required per year. And I'd say that from the point of view of in reforestation sites, you have an added problem in weevil control. Some sites you have minimal weevil and no control is required. And other sites you could actually spray them 3 times per year, you know, in the first 2 to 3 years. So okay. That would be the determinant.
And just to be clear, no grant either, no replanting grant available.
There's no replanting grant currently. There is an option there if you would convert a conifer high forest into a native woodland, that you could apply for a conservation grant on it, but it'd be on a case-by-case basis, subject to Forest Service approval, and it would be a maximum of 13 hectares.
Okay, just a comment from William there again, or Will, sorry. Local forestry producer groups run by farmers for the farmer should be highlighted as an avenue to market for forest, and not just the private forestry companies. So I think as an organisation, we don't advocate for any one particular avenue in terms of how private forestry is mobilised, but obviously our members, we have forestry producer group members, we have private forestry companies as members, so we have a broad membership. So we don't advocate for any one particular approach over another. Only specific webinars might have representatives from one sector on that compared to, and we're open to working with other members to roll out webinars and how they can also contribute to the mobilisation of private forestry. So that's thanks for your comment on that, Will. Just a final point. We're coming to we still have 10 minutes left, so just a few final points. What are the biggest barriers? And we have mentioned licensing, and I don't want to dwell on that issue, and I know it is a very important issue, and I'm not saying that from the point of view of making any less of an issue that it actually is. But outside of the licensing issue, Maurice, what are the other obstacles in terms of mobilisation of private forestry? Is fragmentation an issue? Is size of the estate an issue?
Of the estate is a big issue. You know, having a small forest and trying to get timber out of it, if it's, you know, located a long way from a main road, for example, you know, having to build an expensive forest road, it's the further investment from the forest owner into that forest to get that timber to market. So, you know, there is a road grant that covers the establishment of a road into the forest, but very often that road won't, that grant may not actually cover the full costs. So there's that further investment that tends to be a stumbling block. The small scale of the forests and the value of timber coming out from it doesn't sort of lend itself to further expenditure from the forest owner, you know.
Okay, Noel, do you want to come in there on that? Have you any further comments?
Just on a larger front, we're obviously this year we're looking at around the 2,000 hectare range. We want to get to 8,000, and this is and beyond that if we can. Although 8,000 appears to be the target that really we're trying to focus on at the moment. Like in terms of forestry, we do need it as a carbon sink. It is the best carbon sink we have, and being able to get that into large numbers of hectares, really, to me, one of the big questions we have is we need to get 8,000 hectares. You need probably in the order of 500 to 1,000 landowners to make that decision every year to plant. So there really is a question in how we tackle the overall hearts and minds of landowners to start looking at forestry in a much bigger way as it did in the 1990s. How do we get them to look at that? And part of the issue there, I think, is the need to see the forestry that's in already being a success, that their neighbour that has forestry has got on well with it and is happy to speak well of it. And and obviously from that, the whole system needs to be fairly smooth, and it needs to be something that they all have confidence in. But I think we really have to look at how we make it overall more attractive, and not just financially, but just to make sure that people it is a good news story for people, and that we can encourage more and more people to make that decision.
Okay, Hugo, do you want to come in? Is there any further point you'd like to add on this discussion?
Yeah, well, basically our biggest problem at the moment, would say, in terms of the media attention that forestry is getting, it's creating a very negative perspective of forestry out in the ether with farmers. Like, for example, I have a farmer in Mullingar, planted 2 areas of forestry amounting to 40 acres. And the last time I spoke to him, he had his license in the system for 2 years, and what he would say to him today, if somebody came to him to advise him about forestry, he would say to them they would be mad in their head to consider it, because like he's not very he wouldn't be a wealthy individual and would depend on getting a few quid from his timber, and just has no faith that he's ever going to be allowed into Tinna's Woods, and it's at a stage now he's going to go past the thing. So all the media out there at the moment is totally negative towards forestry, and we have a huge battle in our hands when you go out to a farmer and trying to convince farmers to plant their land.
So I suppose we need some success stories and advocates out in the wider farming community, and we also probably need a specific campaign maybe around promotion in terms of at a national point of view in terms of promotion of forestry as a very valuable and as a farming enterprise, which it is. Just a follow-on comment or question, and thanks Orla for your questions. Orla Farrell of the Easy Treesy Cran Tree for Ireland project. So this project is planting 1 million saplings with Ireland's 1 million school children on public land as part of the global 1 trillion tree initiative to bring down temperatures by 1 degree as part of the UN Decade of Ecosystems. Sorry, no. It's just disappeared off my screen, apologies. Sorry, it's just disappeared off my screen. But anyways, I suppose it's just important that it seems to be it seems a positive initiative, and Orla is wondering, is it possible for advice be given to local authorities on how they could simply manage these saplings that are planted over a period of time, as not all local authorities have tree officers or specialists in small woodland management within parks. So have you got any engagement, Maurice or Hugo, with local authorities in terms of have they got any forestry of their own or tree plantations of their own which you may engage with them on?
We would have engaged with a number of local authorities where we would have applied for grant aid for the neighbourhood scheme, which would there'd be 2 parts to it, where we would do the initial planting, and then they would get grant aid for facilities as well, such as paths, benches, signage. So yeah, there has been a level, minimal enough, but potential to do more.
Okay. 2 questions here, 2 final questions, Maurice. I'll hand them to you. With the scarcity of timber going to mills, the price of timber coming out of hardware stores doesn't seem to reflect the price going to mills. Would you like to comment on that, please?
I'm not sure the price coming out of the hardware store, but I know this year has seen very strong prices across the board for mature clearfell timber coming out of forests. Actually, it's been a very, very strong price. We saw some very aggressive pricing coming from some of the larger mills,
Okay, and just a final question from John here. With deforestation levels today at an all-time low, vast areas of the country are closed off to afforestation. Now farmers are being asked to plant good agricultural land. I suppose this refers to specific designated lands. Do you want to comment on that, Maurice, in terms of, is this an obstacle to afforestation?
Yeah, and Hugo's probably better placed than I to answer it, but the scope of land available for planting was narrowed a number of years ago, and there'll be strong calls to broaden that scope again and into more marginal land, not necessarily the best of land. We'll never turn down a good acre to plant, but at the same time that there should be more marginal land opened up to planting.
Yeah, there was a report done a number of years ago where there were significant areas of what you'd call good unenclosed land that has been ruled out for forestry purposes, and yeah, that has closed off and reduced the amount of available land. And currently we're at, like in the Independent yesterday, you would have seen the potential extension of glass, definitely for 1 year, but potentially for 2. That would be a considerable worry to us in terms of our people that would be interested in planting under glass. If you put your whole farm into forestry, you cannot change the plan within the term of the plan. And now we would have potential clients that were just about to exit glass. They have to text back within 72 hours of yesterday to say that they're going to continue for another year. And it's just cutting off another pool of available land for forestry. These would be potential, like there would be significant potential for native woodland and a lot of these sites as well.
Okay, one final question to you, Morris, because we're at our time. Just about the biochar, can you just give us an outline of what you actually use the biochar for? Maybe just what's within a forestry context?
Within a forestry context, so we're looking at it in two scopes in particular. One is particularly from the reforestation perspective, that we would replant forest using biochar as a catalyst to encourage further growth. And obviously it'll store the carbon within the biochar in the soil, and it'll deliver nutrients more efficiently to the tree. So it'll improve its yield class and allow it to capture more carbon. The other side of it is closely aligned to it, where we are trying to use more and more organic fertilizers and trying to deliver that with biochar or through biochar, through direct fertilization of semi-mature forests. We've seen the positive impact that mid-rotation or early rotation forestry fertilizing of those forests can have. So we're trying to encourage that with biochar. I think from a corporate perspective, I think it has a huge potential to address their own carbon issues if they would support and sponsor new planting or reforestation or a fertilization project like that.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Morris. So just to sum up, any final comments, Noel, from you before we finish?
No, just I think that challenge is there in terms of the afforestation program and making sure that we can make it attractive for people to get more land into forestry. It's a very important carbon sink, and we need to grow it as good as best we can. Okay,
Morris and Hugo, do you want to just, from your perspective, just any concluding remarks?
Well, listen, we hope that what's promised from the Forest Service is actually delivered. Change is badly needed in terms of getting applications through. So we hope that whoever is there sees the light and actually delivers on it, or does the right thing. But anyway, one way or another, gets a program delivered for the country.
Okay, Hugo, do you want to make any final comments?
Yeah, I think we need to have a greater foresight in terms of developing schemes for forestry going forward. At the moment, our schemes are competing against each other for the available land for planting, rather than working in conjunction with one another, and it's creating a huge issue.
Okay, I'd like to thank Morris, I'd like to thank Hugo, I'd like to thank Noel for participating this morning. I'd like to thank all our participants with a large attendance this morning, which is great to see. I'd like to also acknowledge the work of Teresa O'Brien, who works behind the scenes to ensure all this runs smoothly for us. So thanks very much, Teresa, for all your efforts during the year in rolling out these webinars. As this is the last one of 2020, I thank you all for logging in over the year. For people that have only joined us for the first time this morning, I welcome you to join us again in January for our next webinar. I would like to just say on behalf of RBA to wish you all a happy Christmas and best wishes for 2021. So at that, we'll conclude and just say thank you very much, and we talk to you the next time.